Good afternoon and a warm welcome to this edition of the Citizens Chat Show here on Civic Space TV, streaming on YouTube. My name is Judith. I'm your host and glad that you're with us. Today we are discussing an interesting topic, Museveni's quest for a 7th term and the recent US brokered DRC Rwanda peace deal. Of course, we'll talk about the broader implications of both these issues. And just a little bit of background and context, of course. You all know that on Saturday, June 28th, President Yoweri Museveni picked nomination forms from the NRM headquarters for the upcoming 2026 elections. Of course, it signals his intention for a 7th term, but concurrently, the DRC and Rwanda signed a US brokered peace deal on June 27th, 2025, aimed at ending decades of conflict in the Great Lakes region. These two events are, of course, happening almost simultaneously. And while seemingly distinct, internal political stability or instability in a key regional player like Uganda can certainly have significant ripple effects on broader regional diplomacy and security initiatives. And we'll be talking also a little deeply and broadly about this. But to discuss this, of course, I take this opportunity now to welcome and introduce to you our usual panelists on the show. From my immediate left, Dr. Robert Ojiambo, head of the History Department at Kyambongo University. A warm welcome to the show, Dr. Ojiambo.
Thank you, and good afternoon, viewers.
Next to him is Honorable George Odongo, a member of the East African Legislative Assembly. A warm welcome, Honorable. Good to have you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
We also have the only lady here, the fearless Dr. Sarah Bireete, Executive Director, Center for Constitutional Governance. Always a pleasure to have you on the show, Doctor.
But we also have you. Why do you say that?
You are the lady. I am the one asking the questions. You are the one responding.
And we have the lady in the production team. So there are 3 ladies.
Okay.
Good afternoon, viewers and the followers of Citizens Chat Show.
And of course, next to her is Mr. Joseph Ochieno, UPC man, UPC commentator, UPC ideologue, and social political commentator. Good afternoon, Joseph.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. You are what is Sarah? Fearless? You're not fearful. You're a fantastic presenter.
Thank you. And last but not least, retired Major Awich Pollar, Director for External Affairs at the NRM. He's also an advocate of the High Court. Always a pleasure having you on the show.
Greetings, my colleagues.
Yes. So again, just to give you a bit of context, if you're listening or if you're watching us, we know we are at a pivotal moment as a country as we count down to the 2026 general elections. And of course, Saturday's event, President Museveni picking his nomination forms for a 7th term, has ignited significant debate, not just here locally, but also globally. A lot of conversations, a lot of questions are being raised, of course, about issues such as democratic transition, political freedoms, and the trajectory of governance in Uganda. The president's long tenure has seen, of course, periods of relative stability and economic growth, but also there are increasing accusations and concerns of authoritarianism, suppression of opposition, and of course, the entrenchment of a patronage system. And as the country prepares for another electoral cycle under his leadership, the implications for Uganda's political landscape, its institutions, and its future remain a central point of discussion, including here on this show. And that's what we shall be starting with in this first hour. And then later we go and take a look at the DRC Rwanda peace deal. But just very quickly, I'll start with the question of longevity of rule. At what point, and I'm just throwing this randomly, does a long tenure become unhealthy to the development of a country and precisely robust democratic institutions? Who goes first?
Okay. Yeah, Judith, thank you.
5 minutes.
The picking of forms on Saturday, you just need to see how it was greeted with a lot of violence later, and the quietness of the country. There were only a few people who were excited, especially those ones who are around him. But many people, one, it is obvious, but two, it is monotonous. But me, I just wanted to start with how later people misuse such things and beat up people and ransack women, including, by the way, Grace Akelo, the former director, Akulo, the former director of the CID, whose son's nose was broken, is now in hospital, and her money was taken, plus her phones. And yes, they have arrested some people, but I have not seen a strong statement from the NRM because those guys were putting on yellow. But going back to the point, it is an African disease. African disease. In Africa here, it is almost, when you see Cameroon, they have the same problem. In 4 months' time, Paul Biya will be picking forms to stand when he cannot even recognize where he is. In most cases, the other time he was in the US, but meeting Biden, but he didn't know where he was. They had to remind him. You have seen many times what has happened to Salva Kiir in Southern Sudan. You remember Jomo Kenyatta. It almost became illegal to talk about the age of the president. So you had to say 78 years young, not old. If you say old, you say who is old. All the leaders who have been here, once they're in power, they have either to be pushed out by force, or they have to die there, and they feel that they are the panacea of the country. And that's what has become of Yoweri Museveni and his supporters. They think that without him, the country Uganda will end, and it will stop there. And it is something that they have preached. They will tell you, you know, development of democracy needs a person who has experience. It needs a person who understands the revolutionary. Yoweri Museveni, first of all, when you put him, categorize him under revolutionaries, he's no longer one, because revolutionaries go to fight for a certain mission, and they don't so much enjoy. This one has ever enjoyed, because he's going to make 4.5 decades if he goes through. And that one, we have never seen such a revolutionary. So I think, in my view, that it creates a very big problem, because they are generational leaders. So this person enters into the generation of now his children. His children are the ones supposed to be leading the country now, and he's supposed to be maybe doing some work. As he said when he was coming, that he just wanted to lead for 2 years and then go to look after his cows. I think now we have understood which cows he was meaning. I think we are the cows. We are the cows, because he finished 2 years and he went to look after his cows. So I think we are the cows. I feel, as you asked, it somehow affects democracy, because the presidency now looks like Yoweri Museveni. When you talk about a president in the Republic of Uganda, you are meaning Yoweri Museveni. His children think that the State House is their home. In fact, his son calls our country his country. He says, my country, and so on. And me, I normally tell people only that the nuclear family member has not yet died. We shall not be shocked when one of them dies and is buried at State House.
George, over to you. Longevity of rule. Is it healthy? At what point is it healthy? At what point is it unhealthy for the progress or growth of our democratic institutions?
See, longevity in itself is not a problem. The problem is probably in the character of leadership, because it has an impact on how institutions work, on the functioning of government, on the delivery of public services. So the question of longevity, of how long a president or how long a member of parliament should serve, in this case you're talking about the president, that was already dealt with when the constitution was amended. Trouble is that we need to put in place guardrails. I think the bulk of, there's too much centralization of power in the presidency, so that the president has overreaching powers. So if you found a president who does not have the qualities, he could probably misuse those powers. So we need to deal with the question of the institution of the presidency. What are the vertical and horizontal checks to the powers of the presidency? And I think in our case, we put in too much powers in the presidency. And I think President Museveni has been very generous in the way he has been using his powers. And we may not be lucky to have another president like Museveni. So we have to be very careful that if that fell in the hands of somebody else, he could really over-exercise some of the powers that are vested in the presidency. So for me, the question of longevity is not the problem. The problem is that we have got to deal with the institutional framework. Legal, framework that vests a lot of powers in the presidency and could therefore be misused. And that can be a problem for a country. There are cases where longevity has produced dividends for countries, I can give you examples, like in the case of Singapore, the president was there for a long time and he's now called the grandfather of
35 years.
35 years.
To be precise.
Yeah, but now it depends on what you define as longevity. Does longevity start at 35, at 40 or 50? I don't know. But I'm just giving you.
Maybe to start at 100.
Yeah, but you see, he was there for 35 years. And he put the foundation on which Singapore is now built, So to me, really, the question of longevity should be dealt with in the broader context of powers that are vested in the presidency and how those powers are used. Are they, are we having an extractive relationship with the institutions that are under the control of the presidency? Or do we have a president that is making the best use of the time that he has been given? Remember that, you see, again, our constitution provides that the people will elect on a regular basis. And so our investment should be on the quality of that election, so that the election is a legitimate one and should be able to determine who we think is the best person to provide that leadership. I think if we only had, if we have free and fair elections, the question of who is providing that leadership will not arise.
Thank you. Over to you. Same question. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I was thinking through the submissions of Honorable Judge Odongo. And I want to, we are finding issues around the elephant in the room. The issue is, how long are you there in power? When the wave for new constitutionalism in Africa came, the new element was term limit in the early 1990s. And people had thought that Africa now would be able to take off from the baggage of bad leadership. And if somebody has a maximum of time they can exercise the powers of incumbency, then you are able to limit the damage of their excesses. They are not perfect human beings. So we cannot argue that a leader is good or a leader is bad. As a nation, we should build for all seasons, so that we don't base on who is good, who is bad, and then what do you do. We must have standards that are able to limit even the so-called good leaders, but check the bad leaders from damaging the country. And then that's why term limits are a key, ingredient in constitutional democracy. I was just confirming two facts on the phone. One is that President Museveni is the fourth longest serving African leader after Nguema of Equatorial Guinea, Paul Biya of Cameroon, Denis Sassou Nguesso of Republic of Congo, then you have Yoweri Museveni, followed by Isaias
Afwerki.
Yeah. All these countries I've mentioned are failed states in Africa. It's only Uganda which can say it has some bit of light out of the 5 I've mentioned. Proper failed states. What does that indicate? And I want to refer to President Museveni's one of the first fundamental statements he made. And I've never had an accurate statement 100% from President Museveni, like what crowns his book on what is the problem of Africa. And he was clear. The problem of Africa is not the people, but the leaders who rule for too long. When he later became the problem that he clearly and properly described, then he attempted to amend his own statement. I said, without elections. But it does not.
Comrade Kaguta change it.
Comrade Kaguta.
It doesn't
Terms
change.
and conditions.
The book, What is the Problem of Africa? We don't associate with the amendment he put it after lifting term limits. So that book was clear. That's when he was called the new breed of African leaders. Because people thought he had discovered the magic. And then, I don't know where Satan came from. Then that amendment became Satan. And then President Museveni, the author himself, became the devil. Because how else can you describe what became of that man? In next year, January, we shall be going through the 12th election as a country and the 7th under the 1995 Constitution that he helped, supersede or supervise, and is one of the godfathers of that Constitution. But he has also become like a midwife who strangles the child during birth. He has not allowed the 1995 Constitution to breathe the life of stability in political leadership. So what does longevity do to a nation? It weakens all institutions of governance. It disempowers the people. It creates inequalities. It makes them permanent. The people who have access to state resources will continue having those access permanently, and those without access will become extremely poor. And these are the disparities we have in our poverty, multidimensional reports. Complete poverty in the areas of Western Nile, areas of Karamoja, and parts of the north. Complete prosperity, generally, in Western Uganda, in Central. This cannot change the power dynamic unless you change the power dynamics in the country, unless you change the access of state resources. These inequalities, our map of poverty is not going to change. I know people on social media talk about convoys going to Chengera, through Chengera. I have used alternative routes during Christmas, passing through Fort Poto. You can drive with 3-4 cars. At the same time, when Kampala to Masaka is in a bridal convoy, like Bagore. You take just an alternative route and you find empty roads. This is not just a social media talk. It is practical. And I cannot say that all people in Western Uganda or Central are in state resources. But how are state resources distributed? If you bid for a contract, who are the people giving that contract? You might have a wonderful proposal, but unknown. So you find at times you're not shortlisted even.
Your 5 minutes are up. I think we'll come to that.
Just one sentence to conclude. That also Uganda, we need to be mindful that we are the second youngest country in the world with a top-heavy aged leadership. And that imbalance, you cannot cure it through any magic.
Thank you. Over to you, Joseph.
Just to say for 30 seconds of my time that the last multi-dimensional poverty index, I don't know whether there's any more recent in this year, but the last one put my Bukedi as the poorest. So Bukedi is the poorest under those programs, the poorest in the country. And of course, no wonder Joseph Ochieno is the president of Uganda People's Congress, and from Bukedi under the heart of that. But you know what, Judith? 2 days ago, I was talking to a friend from northern Uganda, and I was discussing exactly this poverty thing Sarah was talking about. And that friend of mine, for some reason, possibly thought I was playing politics, but was emphasizing the fact that northern Uganda is generally poor, and poor partly and primarily because of politics. But guys, Mr. Museveni, when he came in 1986, at the Faculty of Law grounds is where he addressed us as Makerere University students. So where he was talking about those 2 years, in fact, people were saying 4. He said 2 years because I was there. At the Faculty of Law grounds. And they say they're not going anywhere. They're not going to play politics and things like that. And you know, the students who came left with a bit of mixed views and mixed opinion, but a semblance of hope. We had a bit of mess created by Museveni, DP, and the other friends with Okello since 1985. And so they said, these funny guys who've come from the bush, dragging whatever, they must meet something. Let's give them a benefit of the doubt. I'm saying that for the first time. You can imagine that. But 40 years is madness. Number 2, Dr. Jambo. It's not an African problem. It's a question of leadership. And I think before we came on air, Sarah was trying to, in our conversation, we acknowledge that in NRM, Museveni's organization, they're fantastic citizens. We just need to hope and pray that they get liberated. So it's actually possible in this Africa for leaders to emerge who can actually push us forward. Now, guess what? In this country, Milton Obote led from 1962 to 71 January. That was a year before the elections. We had issues in 1966-67, hence the 1967 elections. One of the complaints of Mr. Museveni was that these leaders had stayed too long, as has been presented. But in 1976, and I've said it on this program in different contexts, because Africans and Ugandans ought to know, it was Milton Obote who told Julius Nyerere, Sarah, on a meal, thankfully Mama Mira is still around, we can go and have tea with her. And they were there, the 2 presidents and their wives, telling Nyerere that, look, it is good for us to retire when we're still popular, not necessarily young, when we're still popular. So turns out, as I understand it, that had Obote not been overthrown in 1971, he would not have been there in 1980. So meaning there are certain calibers of people who ever lived here, and some of them around town, but we're going to be missing out, and we're missing them. And it's important. My point is to give hope to the likes of George and this younger generation of leaders who are coming up. Sorry, you should maybe return politics one of these days, younger leaders to say that, look, what we are talking about is possible. It can be done in this continent. What happened in Singapore can happen here. Officially, from a UPC perspective, had Milton Obote not been overthrown in 1985, UPC was going to win the next elections in 1985 convincingly, but Obote was not going to be president beyond 1990. That is official. So what is this that people come to power and they don't want to let go. Final point, quickly, George refers to Singapore. It is true that to an extent, it is basically what you deliver. But if Ugandans look, what is it really that Ugandans have got from Museveni in the 40 years? I was talking again to a friend the other day, say, what is the special thing that under Mr. Museveni's leadership, that Mr. Museveni provided, that Ugandans can subject themselves for 40 years, that no other average leader, average elected government will not provide. There's nothing magical. Including this baby old thing of ours. I was just looking at Uganda Agas publication the other day, the oil was there. So it's really unfortunate that this is a conversation we were having, but it's a shame really, Mr. Museveni, that he should be picking up these forms. I'm just asking people in NRM that, look, let's go through these processes, let's go and review and make sure that whatever you do, you are really not escorting a family monarchy, which unfortunately is what we've turned up with today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now, to begin with, we need to agree on maybe the perceptions of longevity. What does it amount to? My view is that we take it from the practice of 2 terms. And of course, as you know, the world seems to take America as best practice. America has the 2 terms, and many countries adopted it. Others with 4-year each, others with 5-year each. So it looks like the mindset of an average term of a president is 2 terms. So anything above that, people seem to think it is long. Well, maybe because short of that, it would be judging it by everyone's perception of what is long and what is short. But I think that is the background of judging the appropriate time, because we take a best practice from America. Unfortunately, sometimes we take even the bad ones, yet they call themselves the best pace setter. For example, it is debatable whether same-sex marriage is best practice, but they will want you to believe because it is American thing. The only thing that has saved us, which is still Europeans have not taken as best practice, is the retention of not removing death sentence from the penal book, because they still have death sentence. We have death sentence. Europe has abolished it. So Europeans have still refused to take that best practice, that, okay, let us also have death sentence in our penalty. Anyhow, I think I have dealt with the definition or the perception about what is long, what is short. Now, in the case of Museveni, first of all, we in NRM, we are the ones who persuaded him in this last taking.
You did?
Yes, we did. It is seen from when he went around for his PDM, many resolutions came, unprovoked resolutions were presented. And for us in the Secretariat, we also had similar views. So it is true, it is on record that he was persuaded. Now, about the what have been done to make this, is that in the case of Uganda, the constituent wisdom, people who had wisdom in the constitution making, knew that for a leader to overstay or to stay, there should be safeguards for that. There were 2 sets of safeguards. There were safeguards which were not entrenched, and there was a safeguard which was entrenched. The 2 safeguards which were not entrenched were age limit and term limit. And why were they not entrenched? Because in the wisdom of the constitution-making people, they thought that since we live in a changing world, by the way, the only thing that doesn't change in life is change itself. But matter is in constant change all the time. Judith, I can assure you that Kampala road you are seeing where it is passing you will not be sure whether Kampala Road will be there in the next 50 years. It might be something else, either a factory or change to something. So change is the only thing that does not change. Therefore, those two provisions were not entrenched, meaning that you can table a constitutional amendment in parliament and amend it. One of the safeguards was entrenched, that is power to the people. They said we should guard and entrench power to the people. And that article, therefore, is a safeguard that should somebody want to overstay, let the people throw him after 5 years. Okay? So we still have safeguards for ensuring if we don't want Museveni to overstay, the people still have that power. So the safeguards are there. Now, and this is why it leads to whether you have longevity or not. Straight to the point of the bads and the goods of longevity. Longevity, for example, United Kingdom, they have had the queen who died was a ruler for a long time. Actually, a ruler, not even a leader.
That's a monarch.
Was a ceremonial person.
Queen was a ruler, and everything done in the kingdom in her name, including Gambia, including declaration of war.
She's the head of state.
Including declaration of war.
That is their state.
Ceremonial.
A monarchical state.
No.
Yeah.
Even declaration of war in UK, it is only the king who can declare, the queen or the king who can declare war.
We must have
Therefore,
a distinction.
Oh my God, I left my friends to listen. Why don't you know? When you were talking, sir, I had many things I wanted to answer you.
It's okay, Major. The
When
microphone
you were
is yours.
talking, I had many things to answer.
You
but
are
I was taking
protected.
my note.
You're protected. The microphone is yours. Carry on.
So, the advantages is that when you have a long person in power, it ensures there's automatic insurance of peace because there's no instability of changing. So that is one advantage. The advantage also is that it makes you have execution of policies or executions of programs easy because you have developed it, you have developed another one, so you can develop the other one. If you realize in America where there's quick change, this one comes with this, another one comes with this. Biden comes and says, we are going to support the world through USAID program. And yet you could know that under international law, every country in the world is obliged or persuaded to give 0.7% of GDP. And America has ratified that international provision. So whatever they give is actually a commitment of their international. The only country that has done up to 1% is Sweden and Netherlands, two countries which have met the So the international obligation of America says America should give to just 0.7. You can see the American aid big because the economy is big, but it's just 0.7. A new government comes and says, nonsense. We don't want it. Stop that. Now, after after Trump, another president will come and say, let's pick up again. You see that disruption. So, if a country is lucky to have a longer president, it shows consistency, it makes implementation of policies, implementation of programs, and it gives security. There's guaranteed security like you have in Uganda. You can walk to Kisoro, you can go to Arua, you can go to Lira, everywhere. However, as the Honorable Odongo says, if you are unfortunate to have a leader who overstays, then you risk. He says Museveni has been generous with his power. I would want to use the word judicious. He has been using his power judiciously, meaning you use it in total guidance by the law. So if you have a person who has stayed for long, the disadvantage is, of course, that if he doesn't use his power judiciously, then the country will risk. Therefore, there is the advantage of being long in power, and there's a disadvantage. And so far for us, we have been lucky to benefit from the advantage of longevity.
Thank you. I know you have rebuttals to that, but before we get there, You will
Yeah,
in your
just,
submissions. When I want to give you another question, and then you'll also react to that. He already actually preempted the next question that I wanted to pose to all of you. The constitutional amendments and the implications. 2005 lifting of the term limits, and then 2017 lifting of the age limits. And Major, you said this was to entrench power in the people. Is that what you said?
I said the saving, the entrenchment of the provision that gives power to the people was entrenched, meaning that it's that provision where you cannot amend by referendum. You cannot amend it just by a bill in parliament. So the legal term there is it is an entrenched provision. The other two provisions were not entrenched, meaning you can move even a private, I think one was, the Mageze one was a private member's bill. Any private member can even move a bill and amend it. Yes.
So thank you. But so the president seeking a 7th term and saying he has been called upon to serve because by the people. And we've had this narrative at every election time. I think from as far as I can remember, every time the president seeks re-election, it's because people want him to contest, not because he wants to. But is this an accurate reflection of the will of the people, or is this just the interest of an individual who just wants to be in power for as long as he can?
Yeah, thank you so much, Judith. Let me just clarify 2 issues. The first one is how long is long? The longevity issue. And I just want to give you an example. We have a team of basketball, for those who are sportsmen, called City Oilers. City Oilers has won consecutively 9 times. Has won the Ugandan accolade for 9 times. How is it called in the basketball circles these days? The dictator. The dictator. So much so that by bad luck, I know right now they are almost going into playoffs. And if City Oilers will reach finals, that final may be empty. Because people really have thought that this is killing of basketball in Uganda. And how did the City Oilers therefore become that dictator? Every time you win this accolade, you get money. You get money from the Basketball Association. And therefore, you are able to buy all the good players from all the teams. And therefore, you make the best team. In fact, they have players from Congo, from Kenya, from all over the place. So if you come Warriors or which one, you cannot compete with them. That is the same thing with the man who stays long in government. He captures all the state institutions. In fact, he becomes the state himself. In fact, in the village where I come from, people ask you, why are you going for election to compete with Museveni's thing again? Why do you want to remove him? So that is the biggest disease. The second disease is that a president himself now thinks that he is ordained to be the president. He feels it looks too ugly that you want to challenge him. And people even think you have some madness. What's wrong with you? And that's why you see the picture that we have in Uganda between the president and the people who oppose him. The ones who oppose him almost look criminals. You look a criminal. In fact, some of us, people sympathize with us. How do you speak about this man? That cannot happen for a one term, and it is everywhere. You talked about those presidents, Biya, who and others. Look at them. Cameroon is one of the most disastrous country with terrible problems. The other one and so on. So much so that one of them cannot even have their own security. We have Ugandans who have gone there as mercenaries to help him to continue. So that is one. But 2 is my friend Ochieno. I have studied African leaders very well. And I did not say it's an African problem by fault. Their character is a character of a king and not a leader. And it comes from our history. Africa was a place where we had chiefs and kings and these people who are ordained by God. and therefore when they become leaders, you don't question them. So presidents like Yoweri Museveni, like Ngwema, like Paul Biya, like Kabila, recently Mama Samia also has started developing the same problem. They think they are kings, they are queens, like they are kingdoms of Buganda, of Toro, of Dizi, of Asante, of Zimbabwe, of Mwene Mutapa, of the kingdoms. So they don't look at us as a state. They look at us as a kingdom. That's why his son will always be the next substitute. Is the son or a daughter. Look at Angola. Angola was almost under the other former president. Was a family thing. Look at Uganda. Isn't it a family thing? Look at Rwanda. Isn't it a family thing? Look at... these are facts. These are facts. But now to answer your question.
In 2 minutes.
The issue of personal interest versus the public interest. You see, again, this one you need to study it very closely. That when a leader stays in power for so long, he becomes a hostage. A hostage of, Malema calls them cabal. Cabal, state cabals. There are people who are benefiting, like Sarah said, from the longevity of the president. They know that when the president is there, they will be a minister, they will be an RDC, they will be this, they will be the chairman of this board. So they have always to pretend that they love the president so much, and therefore they are sure. By the way, they become very calculative. They look at this president, they see that he controls army, he controls a good clout of people, so they will always be safer with him than if Ojiambo came up as a president. Because if I became a president, most of these guys will go home. And that's what they don't want. And that is why, by bad luck, if today I went and picked forms and I stood as an independent because I don't have a party and won presidency, I will not be shocked to receive a call from Jessica Lupo telling me, congratulations, this is what we have been waiting for. We have been supporting you quietly. So this is a human character. Human character is very calculative. They look at how they can survive. They look. So this business, you hear people jumping up that the president has requested. I mean, they have requested the president. We are requesting the president. If you opened their medulla oblongata and you photographed it, you will not find any request from developed from anywhere. It is their own request. You will read their own request. They are requesting the president because they want to benefit from him. And therefore, a president becomes a hostage when he wants to leave. I know there are times that Museveni may think that, let me stop. They ask him, where are you leaving us? We cannot allow you. We cannot allow you. So the president sometimes becomes a hostage. This happened to many presidents in Africa, including Moi. Moi, if you know, Moi was not a very educated man, but working with very educated people, professors, Professor Saitoti, Professor Nyang, Professor I don't know what, Professor this. So they always went to the president until later, in 2000s, the president started asking them, Mungu huyu, that this God who wants me to be the president, doesn't he want any one of you? So he said, according to me, Mungu has told me that I support this one. And he was talking about Kenyatta, the son. And that was an agreement that they had made with the Kenyatta, the old man. So me, I want to argue that please don't listen to these people telling you that they have requested the president. They are the ones who, in fact, it is the president requesting them. And they have studied the man's mind. If you want to make Museveni a very happy person, you go and tell him, I have never seen a person like you, a revolutionary man who thinks about this country. You have forfeited everything. You have forfeited your family. You are just what he will say. This man is a patriot.
Thank you. George, we're coming to you. Is the president's quest for a 7th term a reflection of the true will of Ugandans, or is this, like Dr. Jambo says, NRM echo chambers?
Well, you know, that's a very difficult question, but also very easy. Difficult in the sense that I am not the one who determines. And the only way to determine whether or not it's a true reflection of the will of the ordinary citizens is actually through an election. Every political party has its structure, has its processes, has its institutions. In the case of the NRM, by the way, we haven't yet, for your information, we haven't yet determined who our presidential candidate is. Yes, this week has only been expression of interest. And there are people who have gone and they are expressing their interest. I'm aware there are those ones who went there too early and were told, please, hold on. The process is continuing.
But the
Wait for your
other was
lane.
given. How is it too early
No,
for
the other
others?
one was given because he's still a president. He's still a president.
Candidate president.
So the circumstances under which he has been, he has, not
Odongo today
necessarily,
is becoming a chemical ally.
because you see, the president is still the president is still the president. So when, I mean, you will not expect, really, you will not expect that the president
I thought it's
is
election
going,
time.
just hold on, you are not going to expect, because even during elections, in Uganda, there is no vacuum. The president still remains the president. That's how our constitution is framed.
Up to May.
Yeah, so the president requests, according to his schedule, that, you know, this is my time, this is the best time for me to come, because when he comes, you can see that there is a lot that goes on security deployment, all that. You don't want to be inconvenienced, you as another aspirant, also trying to get your way there. So the others are going to express themselves. Anyway, so the party, the National Resistance Movement, is still processing applications for those who are interested. And once we get the numbers, we shall determine who becomes the flag bearer for the party. But you see, that notwithstanding, Ugandans will have the opportunity now to determine through an election. And that's why initially, and I don't want to go into an academic discussion about popularity of the president or not, there is a litmus test for it, and it's coming during elections. And that's why my interest has been that can we make our elections a very, 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 you know, well-organized election, so that its outcomes are legitimate and a true reflection of the interests of Ugandans. So we should be putting a lot of interest in preparations for that election, so that if this candidate is not popular, the people should be able to say, we do not want this candidate. For me, these are the real safeguards to the future of this country, irrespective of whether President Museveni is going to be a president or not. Any other president who is going to come, any other candidate who is going to come, will contest under the same conditions, so that you have Ugandans exercising their right, you know, to elect a leader of their choice. So for us as the party, as National Resistance Movement, we think that the best person to provide leadership, okay, for me at the moment, because the party didn't pronounce itself, for me at the moment, the best person to provide that leadership is President Museveni. If there are others who are coming, well, we will assess them and then we determine. But for me, as I see, President Museveni is ready to provide that leadership. And then Ugandans should be given the opportunity to freely exercise their right to make a choice. If in January, Ugandans choose to say that they would rather go with President Museveni, that will be the best, in my view, the best indicator of whether or not the choice of President Museveni is a legitimate aspiration of Ugandans or not.
Thank you. Is it the will of the people? or not?
How do you quantify the will of the people? The will of the people is quantified through credible, free and fair elections. It's not just a matter of throwing the word elections around and say we have quantified the will of the people. Uganda, for the record, has not had a credible, free and fair election under the 1995 Constitution. And this will be the 7th election under the same Constitution. Why do I say so? The Constitution goes, to the extent of describing many issues surrounding the architecture of the process of the elections. One is Article 1, power belongs to the people who shall exercise this power through free and fair regular elections. We have only managed the issue of regular. When the elections have been put to test, the Supreme Court of the country on 3 occasions have ruled that the elections fall short of the standard set in the Constitution. And since I have limited time, I want just to go with that summary because we don't have all the time. I want to explain the issue of ceremonial versus executive power that got my friend Afanda, which is very angry. In Uganda, in Africa, we have one ceremonial presidency, and that's King Museveni, who is ruling under monarchy. The rest of the presidents in Africa are executive presidents. And that's what we say. The other day I saw President Museveni declaring himself a modern king. And I think his cadres have assumed that we are now under monarchy. We are not. It is only by their designs that they seem to equate Uganda to a monarchy, but we are not a monarchy. So President Museveni does not enjoy ceremonial powers, and you cannot compare him with the Queen, may she rest in peace. You cannot compare him with the President of Germany, who is also ceremonial, and other countries that have that ceremonial arrangement. Although
Ethiopia.
the President of Germany is elected, although exercises ceremonial powers, not executive powers. So there is a very big distinction. That's why you see Muswati has enough time to marry every year, do whatever. He's not in charge of the country.
Yeah.
So that is the only ceremonial power that you can talk about. The King or the Queen of England, who is also the head of the Church of England, his ceremonial signing documents. It does not make you the person who is processing these documents. But you look at our UPDF bill, where the president even has time to process bribes for MPs, write letters threatening judges after passing the verdict. He has time to meet caucus 3 times. The 3rd time he just opened his eyes and said, I am who I am. And then they knew what to do. Does the head of ceremonial institution in England do such things? So we cannot compare the incomparables to mislead viewers. On the issue of safeguards, term limits and age limits, how were they removed? Term limits, I think, the removal led to the first official bribery of MPs under the infamous 5 million bribe distributed in Mosakot, the hotel owned by the first vice chairman of NRM. Age limits, it did not just take money. The army surrounded parliament and better up MPs, most of them, Semuju, Honorable Karhanga, Honorable Nambos and others, Honorable Moding, spent weeks in hospital out of brutality of the army. So was that the will of the people? That you surround, not only surround parliament, but you evade the chambers and beat up MPs who don't support an amendment. Is that the will of the people? You look at the passing of the UPDF amendment just a few months ago. Parliament, all roads blocked, Then the coffee bill, MPs beaten, Honorable Marende is still in Nairobi. Is that the will of the people? Is that how democracy is exercised? Or what my colleague calls ceremonial democracy? Is it how it is exercised? As I conclude, in 2006, Honorable Sejusa, who was then the head of intelligence, is on record having said that in 2006, Besigye defeated Museveni. These are his words as a chief of intelligence then. So is it that Museveni is the most popular Ugandan who cannot be defeated? It is a lie.
Thank you. Joseph?
Yeah, Museveni is not the most popular Ugandan. Museveni has been around for the last 40 years, and the other day I was meeting fantastic young people who are already in their 30s and 40s, and some of whom will tell you that Museveni came when they're 1 or 2, 3, and it's all they know. They don't actually even know that there are some formalities designed for State House operations, yes. You know, many of them, the majority of the 40 plus and younger, don't know that you can diselect a president. The majority of them don't know that Museveni was a reject, that Museveni lost elections, you know, in 1980. He lost, came third, not second, came third. And then instead of respecting the will of the people of Mbara North, yeah, and waiting for the next election, 1985, he went to Luwero, Museveni. You know, so will of the people, neither here nor there. And finally, most importantly, we are discussing Museveni's time in State House. The majority of Ugandans forget that nobody gave Museveni the keys to State House. He broke into State House in 1986 and spent 10 years perfecting his art. Then came 1996 Constitution. And for another 10 years, ruled without any competition until 2006, so he started limping towards
Did you just say he broke into State House?
Yes. Yeah, Mr. Museveni broke into State House and lived like a squatter, and legally, technically, I think he's still a squatter in State House. But that's a different topic. Look, I just wanted to reinforce the point Sarah made, that in Britain, the longest serving British Prime Minister in history was 20 years.
Brea.
No, Robert Walpole.
Yeah, yes.
1721,
Yeah.
1742. The longest serving, 20 years.
Brea was 15.
No. Then some other guy, 12 years. That is 1868. Then Margaret Thatcher, 11 years. Followed by Blair. In contemporary terms, Blair, 11 years. And the British people find that completely unacceptable. But Britain is the colonial power of Uganda. So you can wake up, release Mr. Museveni, let the guy go and look after his goats. The shortest serving British Prime Minister was Liz Truss. 42 days, 2022. Britain did not break. So this nonsense that stability, no, when systems and institutions are in place, it does not matter who is at the helm. It does not matter who is at the helm. And when we've got a spirit of democracy, where if Besigye wins, Museveni releases, if only Mr. Museveni was a good loser, we would not have had the Luwero War. And if only he was a good loser, possibly Besigye would be president, and maybe now Besigye already have served this term. We know we'll be looking for new people. Hence, the question of stability. No, longevity in power is a sad thing. It should be removed from the minds of the Ugandans. And finally, Dr. Ojiambo, on the question that I was referring to, on Ugandan history, I just wanted to detox the minds of young Ugandans about this thing that it cannot happen in Africa. In 1982, in a meeting with the opposition leaders and religious leaders, Dr. Obote, then president, when these Musevenis were in the bush, said that in discussions around the contested outcomes of 1980 elections, that if a committee was set with the religious leaders, opposition leaders, and the governing party, and there was evidence that the opposition had a major case and the subject going to take these matters to court, he was willing to resign pending a conclusion. Now, that is here in Uganda. This thing is possible across this continent. We just have some terrible leaders, and here in Uganda, Museveni has not been a particularly good example either.
Thank you. Major, you will respond, I think, to your colleagues, because you had already talked about this constitutional amendment issue. So you'll respond, and then we'll take a break.
I will respond. I thought this was a different question about does it reflect the will of the people? Yeah. First of all, I'm thinking again and again. I don't know whether the viewers got what I mentioned about death sentence. Death sentence means you have a law in place which says if you do this, you can be hanged. So if you commit murder, you can be hanged. And did, you can be hanged. So that's what I meant, that Americans have it. In Europe, even if you kill 40 people, you cannot be sentenced to death. So that's what I meant. So I've been thinking I may not have come out clear. Now, about the will of the people. The will of the people in a routine change, like in the change of Museveni, it should be judged at entrance. How do you access it? Do you access state power? How do you access state power is what should form whether it reflects the will or not. My brother Honorable Odongo has talked about the party democracy, the will in the party. But me, I want to talk about the will at the national level. Because you can form your party, manipulate yourself, a 2, 3, 4 people party, and declare yourself the flag bearer of your party. So I want the safeguards there. And part of this will is that is the election transparency. President Museveni has been urging for election transparency, including voting with machines. He has been saying, please, if human think we're going to have fraud, let's use machines. And he's committed to that. So you judge the will by a transparency of that election. Now, Doctor has been saying people don't have will, but they have interest. For me, I'm saying, in fact, President Museveni has been saying we should have politics of interest. And interest here is material and not material. If, for example, my interest is he provides security, that is my interest, so I want him there. If my interest is, as he says, that he provides jobs, whether jobs of RDC or job of what, it's my interest. So is it bad to have interest? I would want a president who meets all the interest, and we want him there. Like the king of Brunei. The king of Brunei meets all the interest. And the Brunei people are happy. So the argument that people want Museveni because of their interest, I find it lacking. Because all of us should have interest that is serving, and we want him there. And the interest can be material, can be non-material. Okay? So what is wrong with Museveni, somebody saying, I want him because he meets my interest? Should I want him because he fights my interest? Should I want him because he fights my interest? And if he can provide as broad interest as possible, including PDM, that is where he gets majority. Because Ugandans want their interest met, whether material or non-material, spiritual or otherwise. Karl Marx calls it spiritual. Not the spiritual in terms of God or what, but even you are going for a weekend to a music show. In Marxist literature, it is a spiritual interest because our body needs both material and spiritual satisfaction. Therefore, if as many Ugandans as possible get their interest from Museveni, material, non-material, the better. Now, I want to also make it clear that no amount of guns or force can sustain anybody in power. It is tested all over the world. You would just be deceiving yourself that so and so has kept himself on power because of gun. No. I agree with you. It is the meeting that interest, which is varied, material and non-material. And we believe this in NRM. And I've told people, even in our closed door meetings, said, come on, we're not going to be here because of guns. Let us meet the interest of the people. Let us meet the interest of the people. And therefore, even Museveni longevity is the interest of the people, not the what? To do that. Now, the congressman is saying if you have a system in place, then doesn't matter who is there. That's true, right. But how long does it take to build a system? Remember, you are quoting a British system of 17-something. You quoted a prime minister who stayed in 17-something. You quoted another prime minister of 18-something. They have built systems. So we are building systems. You are quoting systems which has been built for thousands of years. And you are saying, here we have a system. We're also going to build a system. And part of this is what we are doing.
Another 100 years.
Yeah, we're also building a system. In fact, part of why we want Museveni is to build a system. That you are quoting as a system of 17-something years. And that system has
I
been
gave you
perfected.
80s, my brother.
Now,
But anyway.
finally, when Sarah has still gone back to the debate of whether or not kings have power, my opinion is that as long as this king will still look at a bill and say this provision is wrong, take it back. As long as this king will still say this amount of money you have appropriated, question it, that king has powers. And they query bills. And why are bills important? Because a country is not managed in an ad hoc basis. A country is managed through systems, that is through laws. You're not going to do everything by case by case. You govern a system, a country by laws, not case by case basis. So as long as somebody still have that power, that you will take a bill to him to ascend to become an act of parliament, and he could say take it back to parliament, he has powers. Therefore, there are those who have been there for years and years, and it is good for them. So longevity, in summary, therefore, whether it reflects the will of the people or not, is judged at the start of that. Is there transparency? Do people really put that person in power? And we really want to do that because we have been grappling with the most transparency system of election. Do we go by machine? Do we go by what? So that there's no rigging.
Thank you very much. I know you want to say something. I don't know how brief it's going to be because we need to
very brief.
Okay.
You know, when the late President Mugabe used to compare his longevity with the Queen of England, I used to think he had lost it. But now we have a member of the Labour Party here. How many bills has Paris, England, Buckingham Palace ever returned?
I can't remember.
Nothing.
And in any case, thank you. In any case, it's extremely rare that discussions that you expect the Queen or King to edit.
They
it's
don't
a formal process. They don't.
Edit anything.
It's a formality, nothing
Thank you.
else. But
Thank
anyway.
you. So it's time for us to take a break. And when we return, I'd like us to still talk about one last thing before we go into the DRC Rwanda question, which is the issue of corruption and patronage. And you've touched a little bit of it, but I'd like us to talk more about, of course, these patronage networks and how detrimental they are actually to our society. That's after the break.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back from the break, and we're happy that you're still with us here on the Citizens Chat Show. We're discussing, of course, President Museveni's quest for a 7th term in office and the US brokered peace deal between DRC and Rwanda. But before we delve into the second part of our discussion, I just wanted my panelists to talk briefly about one important issue, which of course is something that is widely talked about. The issue of corruption and patronage, of course, the patronage networks that have, for a long time, or for the last 4 decades or so, defined Uganda's political economy under the NRM rule. How do these patronage networks affect service delivery? How do they impact inequality in the country? Sarah, you had earlier talked about this, but let me start with you, Robert, and then we move.
Yeah, of course, I have said this several times, but I just want to correct you. Yoweri Museveni is vying for the 9th term. 9th. Only
Because
that
of
for
the
them, they recognize 7 because of the constitution, but
Yes.
this is the 9th term. So when he goes through, he will have led Uganda for 45 years, you can imagine. Corruption in Africa is the software that runs the hardware called government. Most governments in Africa survive on corruption. And it is because of the patronage that you have talked about. I have always discussed that in Africa we don't have a democratically elected leader. We don't have. The whole of Africa. What we have are semi-authoritarian leaders who most of them acquire leadership through military means, but later sanitize it with election, with the exception of a few countries like Kenya, like Tanzania. The rest of them either came like that, or they are pseudo, like Congo now under Tshisekedi. It is an attachment to the Kabilas who got it, and so on and so forth. So this is semi-authoritarian governments like so much election. And that's why you hear, even on the panel here, people saying that how can you say that this is a dictatorship when there is always a chance to give people to select or elect their leader? So that's how it comes in. We have this strong president who has acquired power through either the gun or other means. Then he sanitizes it with election and uses corruption to create clientelism. So you find clients. There are so many people, and I like how Major Awich put it. I was very happy with him, that you see, they go there because of interest. And the president studies these interests very careful. And he makes sure that he recruits them with their interest. The ones who want leadership, he gives them leadership. The ones who want money, he gives them money. The ones who want ranks, he gives them ranks.
Those who want security.
He gives them security, all of them. So,
Democracy.
so at the end of the day, corruption is used to get clients. So these hawks, you hear African leaders saying that they are fighting corruption. They cannot fight it because they are the greatest promoters of corruption. For example, they come up with programs which are institutional. Because you know, for example, in Uganda, if you are to develop agriculture and prosperity and what have you, there are ministries that are charged with that duty. We have a Ministry of Agriculture, we have a Ministry of Disaster Management, and this man from NEC. We have a Ministry of Trade and Investment. We have a Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning, and so on. But these presidents are very sophisticated that they try to operate outside these ministries. The money can be passed and sent to the other ministries, but the president appears that he is the one giving the people this money. You have seen President Yoweri Museveni. In fact, President Museveni was a student of Moi. In fact, when you see President Museveni is a student of Moi. Now, people like Ruto are students of President President Museveni. That Ruto will go to a place and tell them that he is the one providing a road when that money was provided in the budget. And they move with bags. In fact, the only embarrassing thing that has stopped the president moving with the money these days is when he gave out sacks of money in Busoga. and the people stole it in the rally. They grabbed it and disappeared with it. And even his security men would not discover where the money had gone. So these days he goes with the dame check. He goes with the dame check and he shows that he's the provider of the money. So if a person is giving the money, and I used to say, isn't this promotion of corruption? So you find that in Africa, and I don't want to limit my discussion on Uganda, in Africa, corruption is the software that runs the hardware called corruption. Called the government. And the president is the patron. And us, the citizens, we are clients. You saw recently, teachers were on strike for a whole month. At teachers. They have been talking to the Minister of Public Service, no solution. Minister of Education is as if he shifted from the country. Other institutions is as if they were abolished. Now the other day the president finds them and says, now my teachers, I have discovered that I cannot increase your salaries this financial year, but I can do the following for you. I don't know how they are going to do it. I don't know whether they are going to amend the laws and what have you. Number one, your children are going to study for free. So we don't know how they are going to do it. That now I take my child to Budo or to Senti, these private schools, and they should study for free, according to the president's directive. 2, we are going to build for you houses. Build houses for teachers. And all you see, it's as if we have been bewitched. They don't even recognize that they are being deceived. Because how can you build houses for all arts teachers? And so on and so forth. And the strike has now ended. Myself, I was looking at what they have achieved. I don't see it. Because what they have been promised legally cannot be implemented. So isn't that corruption?
Judge, corruption and patronage and the impact on inequality and also service delivery.
Yeah, I think the president and many of the leaders in government have admitted publicly that if there is anything that's a scar in the conscience of this government at the moment, it's corruption. If only we could deal a blow to corruption, I think our country would really, really grow in leaps and bounds. So corruption is a cancer that is eating away, the soul of this country, and we need to confront it. Now, when we decentralized, the idea was that we are bringing services closer to the people. So we put in place an elaborate service delivery infrastructure. And, the what you'd consider the end consumer was at the point of, sub-county. So you have a whole sub-county council. We even have somebody from local government recruited as a sub-county chief, and they even do their budget. So the idea was that we are bringing services closer to the people. We are empowering the people, to budget, to determine their priorities, and then money would be, sent to all these other different delivery points. Unfortunately, I think in doing that, we also decentralized corruption. So we made corruption, we democratized, corruption, and took it closer to the people. So what was supposed to be services going closer to the people, we brought corruption closer to the people. So at every service delivery point, people are poking holes on our service delivery pipelines. And I think this is where we as a country have got to examine ourselves, because corruption is corruption is by people whom we know. Corruption is by people whom we know. These are our relatives, these are our friends, these are our in-laws, you know, and so we create these institutions and they turn out to be extractive institutions. And this is really where the problem is, because if you were a country and we do very, very well, I can assure you that we have some of the best well thought through policies of government. And the bulk of it really is to try to, lift the livelihood conditions of our rural poor people. And we put the bulk of the money in some of these flagship projects. We can count them, you know. We have Bonabagagawale, you know, we had Entandikwa, we had all this. In fact, I remember one time there is a story of a guy who opened up a bar and called it Entandikwa Bar. And when he received Entandikwa money, people who received Entandikwa money came to drink from his bar. But then you see that there was a failure, because this corruption disables our service delivery systems. There was a failure to actually provide leadership at the local government level and all these other institutions to make sure that this money achieves the purpose for which it has been invested. That's also part of corruption, because if the institutions are not able to deliver, they are dysfunctional, and there is nobody who is being held accountable for it. So this is not just financial corruption, it's also about the capacity, yeah, of our institutions, you know, to be able to deliver on the public good. I have done monitoring of government programs, and I can tell you that the biggest frustration is when there is collusion between all these other institutions that are supposed to be the ones providing safeguards of public funds, but they will conspire, and including, you know, either IGG or Auditor General or whatever, and so on at different levels. There are so many of them. I'm not accusing anybody here, but I think that there has been a conspiracy of all these institutions to fail how we deliver services. We would be telling a completely different story as a country right now, considering the amounts of money that has been invested in delivery of public goods. So, corruption is a cancer that all of us must really fight, and we must come out very openly and boldly to condemn it and to get out there to find a way. But corruption is not being done by it's done by people. So there has got to be great investment in the quality of people, in the character of the people who we are going to be placing in these institutions that have the mandate to deliver specific, you know, to deliver the public good to the ordinary wananchi. Yes.
Thank you. Sorry.
You know, if President Museveni fought corruption, he would be fighting himself out of power. Because he uses corruption to retain power, but also to persecute those who disagree with him. If you look at the embarrassing act of the president bribing MPs, members of parliament in Uganda are the most paid public servants. They earn about 40 to 60 million, depending on the constituency they represent. There is no other job. At one time, I know Musisi at KCC was earning 45 million, but they reduced it since then. So it was the only public service officially paying money that you could compare with the members of parliament. People earn, average is 50 million. Because people earn 40, 45 million are from Kampala works, so who don't have mileage. Mukono maybe. Others, majority earn between 50 to 60 million. Then you add a whole PDM to one person because you want a certain bad bill passed, 100 million. That Afanda which thought delivering the PDM is a miracle, but this miracle you give an empty swallow, just one stomach, swallows the whole PDM man of a parish. Cutters of President Museveni is bribery tactics. Sometimes he says he has never been corrupt. But he started bribing MPs to legislate bad laws from 2005 openly. If it was there before, Ugandans didn't know. But in 2005, we got to know about the 5 million bribery. And now he made it normal and even justifies it. The other time, on a Buru, I thought Buru papers would be respected and authoritative, communicating important things. He wrote on a Buru paper defending corruption. You people who are saying this and you earning money from foreigners, so what? Doesn't he get half of his budget funded by foreigners? When you go to the 10 points program, point number 7 was elimination of all forms of corruption and the misuse of power. He does both and at excessive limits. Then, if you are a good cadre, even if you are caught in a scandal like we saw with Mabati, you will make sure it dies out. And then, if you are a bad person, then you go to court so that it's easy you have eliminated yourself. So for there is the only time you can see the prosecution either through IGG or DPP working because they consider it to be a bad element. So from 2001, President Museveni, every election, he says he's going to fight corruption. And then citizens, poor citizens, they think he means business. Even now, when he picked the nomination forms, from the 10 points program to the time when we lose 10 trillion, as a whole country, we correct between 32, now the projection is 37, but last year we corrected 32 trillion. And we lose 10 of that trillion to corruption. And he's busy telling the people correcting forms. Now I am going at 80. It's something you didn't fight at 40. Now I am serious. I am going to fight corruption.
Hakuna mchezo.
Because he knows it is what citizens want, but he cannot do it. You cannot offer what you don't have. On patronage, of course, it goes. It's hand in hand through appointments and through monetary rewards, plus official and unofficial monetary rewards. That's how President Museveni keeps power. During the campaign trail, you will see him. He uses money. I know that the electoral laws prohibit money. But in every petition, presidential election, the 3 under the 1995 Constitution, there is use of taxpayers' money for political benefit of the incumbent, including the one of Amama Mbabazi. Including, that's the time where Rwanda took horse, among others. So you will see money, one or the other. In the last election, he had resorted to delivering it himself because he would give his cadres. Then it disappears like the money that caused Abelga to die. Because Abelga was about to meet the president to ask his money, which had been dispatched and eaten. Now people had eaten, said, now this man is going to give us problems. So, he cannot. They just, citizens need to know that that's something he can never do.
Thank you. Joseph?
Oh, no, a Biriga thing I suddenly then remember, a Biriga, corruption, money linked to State House, the #1 Republic House. That is terrible. As Sarah says, if really...
Maybe to add on, that's the period even when people collect bribes, schedule meetings with him, and he talked about it. I hear people around me solicit bribes for appointments. He knows.
I have fantastic friends who, when I say that this country will not change unless and until Mr. Museveni retires, they think I've got something personal about Mr. Museveni. He's a great guy. We helped him. If UPC hadn't helped Museveni, he wouldn't be what he is. But he's a Ugandan citizen, and I like all Ugandans. But the guy is just really the heart of the problem. Judith, had Uganda been what it was today, like some of what Sarah's referring to, I possibly would have gone to Mwiri. But gladly I was amongst the most excellent in the country. But I think being the most excellent in the country doesn't matter. So I went to Mwiri. So I found myself in Nyerere. The only thing I missed, thanks to Nyerere, is cowardice when they arrested me before settling to get public service jobs. Of course, by then it was already going away. You didn't need to know anybody. All you go to find your name on the list. Context of corruption. Your name is just there. Just which hall, wherever, then you go. And then you wait for your man, and then you get. Peter Walobiri of UPC sometimes is on record to say when he graduated, he got 2 public service jobs, as a student, so he had to pick one. A good friend of mine passed while I was in exile, David Okechuwori. He was the second last Secretary General of the National Students Union, NUSU. And when I went to visit him at University Hall the year before I joined university, I found him with 2 letters saying, "Oh, tell me, Joseph, what do I do? I've got 2 offers. I'd got 2 offers, a job in Ministry of Justice and a job at Bank of Uganda." And he was saying, "I don't know which one to take." Interestingly, I think he took Ministry of Justice, public service jobs. Today, of course, they now think that, I didn't go to Bank of Uganda kind of stuff. Systems that work. Mr. Museveni, 1970, just walks to President's office, done his average economics in Dar es Salaam University. He gets a job in President's office, as a public servant. Nobody knew him. Wilson Okwenje, by the way, of Yosami, head of research, President's office, gives Museveni a job. Impossible today. That President's office is the heart of it. Ugandans need to know, and for my few minutes to say this, that this is what presidents do. In 1982, Tiny Rowlands of Londro wanted to get the contract for oil pipeline to Uganda, which the then second UPC, Uganda government administration for you people, was working on, and projects for cotton and coffee. Kaunda sends him to Obote. Obote says, "Look, thank you for your proposal that you want to get by this project." I'm thinking Bireete here and Londro. And Obote said, "Look, thank you for coming to see me. Thank you for your proposal. But normally, what you brought for me normally comes to me through relevant cabinet ministers through after cabinet discussion. But Mr. Rowlands, even if it had come through the relevant cabinet minister, I would reject it." At that time, Rowlands told Obote, it's on record, "Mr. President, this deal would be good for you and your ministers." Do you know what? Obote went ballistic, threatened to make Tiny Rowlands a person non grata in this country. I'm talking about the power of this thing at the top. You know what? Rowlands left Kampala, drove to Nairobi, went to London, from London, went to look for Museveni in Sweden. It's alleged, since I'm surrounded by lawyers here, that possibly Tiny Rowlands' aircraft may be that one that may have helped Mr. Museveni coming fast journey in 1986. It's alleged. Obote told me in 2002 at his balcony in Lusaka, "Joe, for the 2 times I was president, no close member of my family was allowed to have a bank account outside Uganda." That's what you do. That's what you do as president. No wonder UPC delivered for this country what NR has failed to do in 40 years. Leadership has got to come from the top. At the moment, leadership is about leadership of corruption because it's personalized in nation state, personalized delivery. Unfortunately, it won't change. And until...
Thank you for your submission.
Thank you so much. I think corruption, everybody knows what it is, so somebody doesn't need to labor about what it is. It is even provided for in various legislations, IGG Act and all that. It is defined in many pieces of legislation. So we don't need to. What is not clear is patronage. Patronage is not defined, but I think it is generally understood, like Sarah said, the way a leader or handles some particular people in favor and particular people close to him in either blood relations or otherwise. That is what we know to be patronage. doing good for somebody at a favor. That's why they always hear you are patronizing with somebody. Now, back to corruption, on patronage, it is not clear, so I won't talk so much about it because of its unclarity in a society. That is why no particular law has been thought to be presented to prevent patronage. It is neither here nor there. It is subjective. It is not objective. It is subjective. If it was objective and clear like corruption, maybe we would have come with a law about patronage. If it is discussed, it is in other definitions. Therefore, I won't talk so much. But all I know is that appointments, many appointments are provided in law, either constitutional or otherwise, and therefore the president follows the law. Appointment in statutory bodies, ministers come with names in cabinet, and cabinet discuss, and it is passed. So in ED, National Water and Sewage, or what, and all that, it is done like that. So patronage is difficult to discuss because it is quite subjective. Now, on corruption, I think we agreed even in the movement that there's corruption and it needs to be tackled. I need to say we agreed because there are some people who did not agree. Some people at the beginning were arguing that it is just the press which is making us say there's corruption. There's no corruption in society. It's because newspapers write. And that's what some people are saying. And also it was made worse by Transparency International was judging corruption by the number of reported cases in the press. Meaning that if Eritrea did not report anything in their newspaper, knowing what Eritrea is, Eritrea would rank very low that there's no corruption. But some of us, because we live in the community and we are party cadres, we said, no, there's corruption. And we insisted on it. And we therefore agreed there's corruption and the president knows about it. And that is why he made a pronouncement. But what I want to say about this is that it is perpetuated by human beings with brain. And corruption knows no party. It knows no color. It knows no race. Even the whites. The Europeans and the Americans, why they have sophisticated their systems through control by computer is because they knew, subjected to human beings, white or black, they will steal it. It is known that American army, because the bank system in Iraq was destroyed, they paid American soldiers in cash. There was a Biakutaga there. Some paymaster in Iraq disappeared with American money. In Iraq, a paymaster of American army disappeared with money. Therefore, corruption knows no color, knows no party, knows no nothing. It's just corruption. Now, I just like to say, now if it is agreed, has there been a time, is there a time to do it? A lot has been done. Legislations has been put in place. Institutions has been put like IGG, the courts, the what has been put in place. Particularly anti-corruption court has been put in place. I have repeatedly said how I wish there's an anti-corruption prison so that you graduate from this to that to show commitment. But also other achievements like money recovery. A lot of money has been recovered by IGG. A lot of money has been recovered by courts of law. And therefore, it is a work in progress because human beings have brains. Therefore, the effects is big. The effects is big. It affects, put it this way, if somebody had a microscopic lenses which could measure houses in Nigeria and know how many of those houses were built on non-genuine money, I think the lenses would burst. Imagine if all these houses were built for government, the money which were built. I'm lucky that I have houses, but if you put that lens, nothing. There are some people where if you put that lens, it will only find a few bricks and say that one is your salary. That brick from there. The rest of this house is not your money at all. So you can see the effect that money which was supposed to be used for government construction is used in private. The entire Nigeria, the entire whatever would be that. Somebody should invent us a microscope which can detect that man of doctor, it is that wall, it is your salary. The rest of this is completely not your money, it is stolen. So the effect is big. Way forward is that as government, first you have to need the political will. Political will is needed. Because even if you are to set a machine in place, you are not going to set a machine which prohibits corruption if you don't have that will. Because machines are set by human beings. So in procurement procedures, in world transactions, in acquisition of passports, where you put that you're going to do passport online, and therefore you remove human person contact, which breeds corruption, all those need political will. And we have insisted to President Museveni, please have the political will, which he has. Because if we don't have the political will, even initiating and setting machines in place to remove human person to facilitate corruption will not be there. We all know that computers are run by human beings. Machines are set. So if you don't have the political will, the machine that should have stopped corruption, say in a passport office or in a revenue collection transactions, you will remove it. Because you know, if you put a machine in the collection of revenue so that you don't want a revenue officer to get in touch with the revenue payer, you will remove that machine because you lack the political will. And the prosecution, DPP retains the power to prosecute, or IGG. They all act for the state. Remember, the DPP has a power to drop a charge at any time. So, if you don't have the political will, DPP acts for the state, and the head of state is there, we know it. It therefore means that DPP will exercise its power to drop a charge at any time. So we need the political will that will, first of all, make the state prosecute cases, but also states to set systems in place, whether you're going to use computer in passport, whether you're going to use computer in a revenue collection, whether you're going to do what to remove human person. So corruption is there, we agreed it, the effects is big, but we have tried as a party because it keeps coming up in our party manifesto, and when it comes up in our party manifesto, we tell the government. Remember, doctor, people think government is stronger than or bigger than the party. Is a party. We are the ones with the social contract with the people. People vote us, then we form government. They are look with the vice president. We deploy them as a party cadre. Said, you have won us our member of parliament, go be a vice president. You have go be a prime minister. Those are our party cadres, just deployed in government. And then the rest work, like you are working in government on contract. Maybe your contract is up to 60 years. You forget that you're working for government, that the people gave their power to us and we form a government. The difference between you is that you're working for a contract of 60. Some people in KCCA have a contract of 5 years, 10 years. You're also on contract, working for the government, power given to us.
No, public service.
Public service is on contract of 60 years.
Yeah, but
the truth, let's just correct one impression that the party is not bigger than the government.
It is.
The party only forms the machinery that runs government. Those are Lupo you are
What
talking
is your
about.
definition of government?
The government, let me, in simple terms, because we talk to simple people, government is like a vehicle, a Tata lorry. So the driver who is Yoweri Museveni, who comes from NRM, cannot be bigger than a Tata lorry.
So I don't want us to drag this conversation any further. We've run out of time, and we're just going to talk very, very briefly about, of course, about the DRC Rwanda peace deal. And just for context, the DRC and Rwanda recently signed a peace deal that was brokered by the US. That was on 27th June 2025. And of course, the conflict between the two is over a shared border, which has for a long time been a flashpoint of instability. And the deal that was signed basically aims to de-escalate decades of brutal conflict, particularly in eastern DRC, which has been plagued by a complex web of armed groups, including the M23 rebels and the Rwandan forces, Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda. This conflict has displaced millions of people over time. And we need to just very quickly talk about the provisions of this newly signed U.S. brokered peace deal, and again for us in the region, how quickly can we expect to see tangible changes on the ground, especially in Eastern DRC, and as a direct result of this agreement, also what are the immediate challenges that we can foresee in terms when it comes to the implementation of this agreement? I think I'll start with George. Let me start with you very quickly. You are the regional experts in this case. But also if you could also look at the role of the regional powers, East Africa. These are our neighbors and they have to fly thousands of miles away to actually go and get another power, mediate and broker a peace deal. What happens? Is that a vote of no confidence in us as neighbors?
Judith, I have spent some time trying to understand the deal between Rwanda and DRC. And I can state without fear that there is nothing extraordinary that was brokered in Washington. But what it confirms to me is that we Africans are still under bondage. And it is a huge indictment on our regional integration project, because essentially this should have been our the first step in the normalization of the relations between Rwanda and DRC should have been really from within. Our integration is premised on the idea that we should have homegrown solutions, that Africa has capacity. We have a Pan-African agenda to our integration, to say Africans should, own up to their future. They should be able to develop their capacity to deal with African problems. But we are seeing what we saw between Rwanda and Burundi, and DRC, is really a case of conflict of egos. We are dealing with a situation that has been blown out of proportion in the way in which it has been presented, but also that we have, elevated, this whole idea of outsourcing. Outsourcing everything, our solutions, we want to outsource. We want to look outside the African context for it. Really defeats the very purpose for which we are coming together. Now, what has happened? DRC and Rwanda first have agreed on a ceasefire. By the way, the whole idea of ceasefire, in my view, presupposes that there will come a time when the ceasefire period ends and you should be able to engage again. Resume hostilities. You get it? But we are looking
if
at...
you don't achieve peace.
Yeah, because we are looking at a permanent solution. So even to draft a text and say we are going to have a ceasefire. Yes, a ceasefire is basically to say there has got to be cessation of hostilities
pending
to allow for other interventions.
other processes.
And that was the basis for the intervention of the East African Community Force. The deployment, initially there was deployment of the East African Community Force in the DRC. It was something that was agreed upon by partner states. However, I think in the middle of that deployment, there was an attempt to change the mandate of that standby force to include direct confrontation with M23. But in the understanding of the East African community, the war, the conflict between M23 and the DRC army is a political one. It's an internal one that should be resolved using internal processes. So the EAC was there to just provide an environment for the internal processes to take place, political, social, economic, whatever it is. But because we do not have confidence in our own systems, we are now going out. First to Doha, and then after Doha, they went to Washington. Because even this one, that for me also was still an indictment on the EAC, where they went to Angola, the Angola-led process. They still failed on account of trust. They were not trusting each other, and they were not even trusting the facilitator himself, because the facilitator, out of politeness, withdrew from the process. But if you read the undertones, it was essentially because one of the partner states had, indicated that they do not have trust, that Angola, in this case, is inclined to a specific partner state in this whole process. So then they went to Washington. The Washington text is so basic. The key driver in the Washington thing, and it is by invitation, by the way, has been this whole thing of the minerals. Yes. So there has been a new ingredient in the peace building thing called strategic minerals, investment in strategic minerals, that is being given to Washington, to the companies from America. So there is a new model now in our peace building called the mineralization of peace and security.
Like they did with Ukraine.
Like they did in Ukraine. So, but this is a big indictment to the EAC, to Africa, because we have within the African Union what they call the peace and security sector, which has a whole peace and security architecture. But also coming down to the EAC, we also have a peace and security sector. And there are provisions within the treaty that says, where there are conflicts that involve partner states, they should be resolved internally. So we should be putting in place systems, institutions, and investing resources, building the capacity of the community to deal with those conflicts when they arise. But we have not built sufficient capacity to deal with that. And all these leaders in the region have remained, conspicuously silent about the situation in the Eastern DRC. I wanted to see a very strong voice emanating from Africa, and also specifically from the East African community, on the situation between Rwanda and the DRC. I have not seen that. I've seen a very, very, very silent, very cautious way with which we are handling the matters of peace and security. And I think it is not right, because what will happen to DRC today may happen to Uganda, and another country may happen to any partner state. So we should be able to build capacity, and leadership must be provided.
Thank you. Ojiambo, your thoughts on this US brokered peace deal between DRC and Rwanda? Is it in the best interest of the two nations, or is it to promote and protect and advance American interests, especially in minerals?
I think I want to look at it at two angles. The first angle is the one of Rwanda, the geopolitics surrounding Rwanda, beginning 1994 with the genocide, and many of the people from Rwanda running to that place. Although some theorists want to argue that, these are indigenous Congolese who are the dominant members of M23. There is also a big fact that that area of Bukavu, Goma, or the northern part of that province has a lot of Rwanda influence. And I was just looking at the map here. The area that is now occupied by M23 is slight half of Rwanda, is almost the size of Rwanda. In fact, is now bigger than Burundi. And you find that Rwanda has denied for so long that they are not involved, but there is all evidence to show that. Up to yesterday, even after signing that peace deal, yesterday the Congolese military downed an aircraft at the border between Rwanda and Congo. In fact, an area which is controlled by M23, but the M23 do not have capacity to control the airspace. So they downed the plane, and Rwanda was the first to complain that they have downed their plane, which was taking food supplies to that region. So it shows you. Then the second thing is the relationship between United States and Rwanda. Many people have not sat down to look at this relationship. There is a very deep relationship between United States and Rwanda, which even made Rwanda to abandon France. If you go to Rwanda now, they have hired Ugandan teachers and Kenyan teachers to teach their children English because they want to abandon French or to use both, but to go Anglo because of their relationship with the United States. You remember United States and Britain, you remember even when they were bringing refugees, the first country that was proposed where they could pick refugees from Israel, from where, which is a project of United States of America, was Rwanda. Now, it is not by mistake that this peace deal is being signed in Washington. It is by design, and that shows you that therefore USA had a hand in this conflict for a very long time. Of course, it has been operating under the UN, MONUSCO, and so on, indirectly, but this is now a direct approach to things. And for those who have studied Trump under his Secretary of State, Rubio, for them, they are not going for any intervention without a benefit to the Treasury of America. And for Trump-like person, it would be like a lion which has seen blood or meat. And therefore, Congo is a lucrative thing for United States of America. And they want to come in directly. So you asked a small question. How does it impact on us? It does impact on us. Remember, our president has been struggling to be the mediator in this issue. He was first accused that there was M23 Uganda, and he denied, and I think all the things that have come have really absolved him somehow, and Uganda. But the trouble is when you look at the bigger part which borders Congo, where now the Goma and Waterview, it is on our border. And therefore, it is something that makes us really to worry. Two, because of the security relations that we have with Rwanda, but two, we were looking at Eastern Congo as one of our bigger market, because Eastern Congo is a better market than Southern Sudan. Southern Sudan, we take their mangoes and the watermelon and what have you. But in Congo, we are taking their garments, we are taking their vehicles, we are taking their so many things. And now it is quite difficult because of the mineral trade in that place. Congo has more money than Southern Sudan, and therefore it is going to affect our trade and I don't know. I have not yet seen how we are in that deal. I don't see ourselves there, but I trust the president. We are going to find ourselves there.
You know, the war in DRC, the federal of the region, especially the East African community that admitted DRC in a rushed manner without considering the impact of the war. The same with the South Sudan and then Somalia on the integration process. And the whole failure of the DRC peacekeeping, EAC peacekeeping force in DRC, with also some corruption allegations to the commander then, who DRC alleged had received a bribe from Rwanda, the first Kenyan general. Yeah. So one is a failure of the EAC. I think if it wasn't for the economic integration element, I think the EAC would have collapsed by now. If you look at the issues happening, one is the deteriorating governance situation. Then, of course, the current leadership, which is Kenya. I hope it is still Kenya, facing its own internal crisis with the young people. Then you look at the challenges in each country, Uganda with our aged longevity leader, Tanzania deteriorating democracy, you look at South Sudan, total collapse. Now you have DRC, I don't know the situation in Somalia. So the outlook of the region is really shabby. Two, there have been many peace deals, and I want to call it deals, previously attempted by the Africans, Rwanda, Nairobi, and other areas, DRC. They could not hold because the warring parties are never on the table. I don't know why people think that they can represent the warring factions in DRC. It's a big mistake. And when President Uhuru Kenyatta told them that if you want peace, you have to bring M23 on table, people ignored him. But so this deal does not bind. It does not bind M23. I don't know whether people think that Rwanda represents the interests of M23. I don't think so. So M23 is not in any way bound by the Washington deal. And they are free to continue doing whatever they are doing. If you tell Rwanda to evacuate DRC territory in 90 days, Kagame is free to say, I have pulled out my troops. But does that end M23 fighting? Not at all. Then you look at the Qatar process, which Washington deal recognizes, but incomplete. But to their credit, at least there was an element of M23 representation. I think maybe that can deliver meaningful peace. But the Washington deal is a business deal. It reminds me of the game we used to watch on DSTV. I don't remember the channel, but South African deal or no deal.
Deal or no deal.
Yeah, so you touch deal or no deal, and there's no time to think. So that's how this Washington thing was procured. Deal? Are you giving us minerals? Are you saying, if you look at the contents, give US access to minerals? It's the first paragraph. The first paragraph is not even peace. It says the US-DRC strategic partnership would serve as a stabilizing force, ensuring that resources are extracted, processed, and distributed through legal, transparent, and US-aligned channels, blocking pathways that control otherwise be exploited, that could otherwise be exploited by hostile actors. So who determines who is a hostile actor? If you go specifically to the proposals, number one, US access to strategic minerals, granting US companies extraction and export rights to secure a stable direct supply chain for defense and technology sectors. Two, banana deep water port development. The DRC proposes granting operation control to US firms, ensuring American oversight of a key African mineral port hub. Three, establishment of a joint strategic minerals stockpile. The DRC is prepared to work with the US to develop strategic stockpile of Congolese minerals, enhancing US economic and security resilience. Four, strengthening military cooperation. Training and equipping the Congolese armed forces to protect mineral supply routes from foreign-backed militia groups. Granting US access to military bases in key zones to protect strategic resources. Repressing ineffective UN peacekeeping operations with a direct US DRC security operation. So 90% of the deal is about the US and minerals. So it's a game of deal or no deal. And it's like what Trump, yes please.
But what would compel these two countries to actually sign a deal that is not even in their favor?
The madness of Africa.
You see, DRC is not affected. Rwanda is not so much affected.
But DRC is.
Two, I think these countries have been watching Trump and the way he, for example, dealt with the Ukraine president the first time. That embarrassment. Two is the Ramaphosa embarrassment, and the Ramaphosa is the big boy in the League of Africa. So if you are invited, ministers are summoned, foreign affairs ministers are summoned to the Oval Office. Do you think that they've called you to bargain?
No.
I don't think so. So now let's wait to see if the president will sign what has been named the Washington Accord, which would then put the seal of their countries, because it's a partial process awaiting the signing of the president. But Rwanda, on the other hand, you see, it's about the DRC. And I know many African analysts have argued that Tshisekedi has sold the country in exchange for peace. So, but if it was 50-50, you can say I am giving access also with the timelines. Because what are the timelines for this thing?
But
Maybe if you say 5 years, yes, George.
But you see, the thing is that that text does not deal with the key drivers of this conflict.
The underlying issues.
No.
You see, doesn't deal with it at all.
Nor addressing actually the broader regional political issues, or indeed domestic political issues in Congo.
So it's by invitation. So remember that the president of DRC, Tshisekedi, is the one who officially wrote inviting Trump to intervene. Okay?
And then Trump said
It's
to
by
the
invitation.
father-in-law.
Invited Trump to come and intervene in their case. Now, the text here does not address, for example, Rwanda is saying, in this case, that we have FDLR, okay, Interahamwe, who are potentially hostile to the Rwanda regime, but have also been integrated into the DRC
community
military. Okay? And then many other underlying issues.
Including especially ethnicity.
Yeah.
Why are M23 fighting? This thing, this mineral deal does not even concern itself. They are like, we are a superpower, we shall come in and silence everybody and create routes for exploiting minerals. It just reminds me.
So in other words, the conflict can as well rage on as long as it does not threaten American strategic interests in the DRC.
Yes, and it just reminds me of the old fiction novel, King Solomon's Mines. It's just a classic replica. Can we put our hands to the minerals? The rest of you guys will sort themselves out.
Joseph, let me come to you.
You know, I've been thinking, and I saw this, and my opinion has been sought in various networks, including external networks. And you know, at that stage, you get very embarrassed. You get genuinely very embarrassed as an African. But from a Pan-Africanist perspective, and from a Ugandan perspective that Dr. Ojiambo needs to take note, you know, Patrice Lumumba, and there was another stuff going around, the manner in which this guy was killed, in a manner in which Katangalese Congolese worked with external forces to kill this guy. And yet, at that time, at the heart, was a strategic new nation thinking how to harmonize and mobilize its national strategic resources for the new independent nation, and that would then be at the heart of Africa. And Nkrumah and others write about something else related to that, something that I have a text somewhere, some informal notes about these things as well as that time. And see, why did these guys die at the time? Meaning, fast forward, what has happened, this is the most silly transactional arrangement by African heads of state on their nation states in contemporary times, the most I've ever seen. While Paul Kagame is neither here nor there, I'm genuinely surprised that in the absence of the question of in the absence of addressing the core issues of the Interahamwe, which have been trying to sink, and Kagame is clever now, he's a spy guy from Tare. So I'm sure they might have some intelligence. They might have some intelligence stuff, Judith, that we don't know and we don't see. But as Sarah is reading this text, it's absolutely important that Sarah gets it, George gets it, and so therefore the citizens of Congo and this region get the question these two are actually asking. What is it really for this sub-region? Other than that, is the most direct sellout. Now, Paul Kagame, you'll be delighted to hear from me. Of the four so-called new breed of African leaders, something that we rejected and reject. Kagame and Meles in Ethiopia post that time, when we discussed longevity, they actually radically attempted to reform their nation states in various ways. We may not disagree with them politically. More recently, while I was looking for responsible continental leaders in the region, we failed, because initially I hoped Kikwete would give that leadership. Kagame's tone when it comes to issues African, and particularly when he's actually motively addressing the Rwandese question, is generally very impressive. So what irony then that it is Kagame who picks an EAC issue and takes it to Qatar. And voluntarily granted, their partners is Congo, so you can say he drags himself down there. It looks rather awkward that the Kagame we've been talking about, boards a plane together with Tshisekedi to go and sort out this thing merely at that stage in the US. I find it extraordinary, and it's one of the things I've been thinking about in the recent past. And I've been trying to use my antennas to establish what else beyond this which has happened. But I think my colleagues have already talked about it. The extraordinary nature of the manner in which East African community is absent. It's a new community. George, before you became a regular here, we used to discuss the question of convergence criteria and how East African leaders failed as the issues that Sarah raised. That how dare they, bring in Burundi, how they particularly then bring in Rwanda and Burundi, in fact, but neither here nor there. But particularly how dare they bring DR Congo and South Sudan and others. Now, how dare they bring these countries? In fact, they could have used this as an opportunity to blackmail them, that you guys, you want to join the East African community, but there is this pending issues here. So far sort them out, or we help you to sort them out, or you agree that we shall have them sorted out, almost like the mini lost counties approach that we had at independence. That is absent. Then after that, who then is the East African leader? And then, of course, you could argue that, unfortunately, Museveni and Ruto have been pulled around as blackmailed, as having interests. It's true, they had interests. But beyond that, when it was going Angola, I was thinking that maybe the region was looking for, because the big guys in the region are named and they're considered conflicted in a way. Okay, fair enough, let's get another African leader to come and help. I sort of understood that it didn't. But finally, where is the African continental body? The African Union at this stage in 2025. You guys, it is shocking. And finally, that it takes Donald Trump, who calls Africa what it is, this narcissist, this racist, Donald Trump, to be able to do this. Generally we want peace in Africa. But to take Donald Trump to do it in such a transactional manner in which it's directly our biggest resource. And we've got Donald Trump, Israel, and others basically, what is the word? They're basically bullying Iran, over uranium, nuclear stuff. And dear Congo, we should be our superpower. We are basically saying, okay, guys, come and take them and go. Oh, I'm embarrassed. But anyway, blessings, Africa.
Thank you. So in other words, as Africa looks for pathways to decolonization, we are actually seeing patterns of recolonization taking
African
place.
youth have got a big job.
Thank you so much. Sometimes I'm really surprised that this is happening right in our generation, in our face. Now, to start with, that the president of Congo wrote to USA. It's just like we have always said that a drowning man can even grab a snake. Because if water is taking you, you see a snake, at that moment you don't even know you
think it is
a snake, you think it is
a rope.
A rope or a tree that can hold you. So the advance at that moment of the forces against the Congolese army was to the extent that the DRC president thought he was going.
Yeah, that's true.
So he just needed to grab anything. And in this case, he grabbed America. He grabbed, whether they grabbed the snake or what, but the water was taking him, so he needed to grab something. Now, for the reason that he thought the intervention of America, which somehow so far has worked, that the intervention of America would stop the advance to host him from power. Because they have seen Kabila go and host Mobutu. So what was not possible with these people advance, they're advancing every week, every day. So he grabbed the snake in the midst of confusion. Now, unfortunately, in this case, the person they went to did not seem to be an arbiter. He acted like a chief whip. You're reaching there, the text is drafted. I've seen in some conferences where you're called in a conference, but the resolution is drawn. I said, who told you this was going to be our resolution? We have not even reached here, but there's a draft resolution that this meeting will have to resolve this before you even discuss. So this is a situation where the chief whip, in the real sense of whipping you, comes here. So the global politics, some of America now wants to draw it like it's a world police. So if it is a world police, it has to be a duty of saying, I want this, I want this, I want order, law and order in any area. So now America acts as you go there, you find a text is ready for you, adopt it. Unfortunately, the text is really not well drafted. Now, like the case of Uganda, it doesn't even acknowledge, like, maybe I've not read the whole text, but doesn't seem to recognize that Uganda has ADF there. So meaning that the other thing would continue and ADF would continue and Uganda would continue to have problems. Possibly the thinking of the making Rwanda a party and not M23 was to think that without Rwanda, there's no M23. Because that had been the argument of DRC.
That's partly true anyway.
DRC was saying, for us, M23 is nothing.
Rwanda.
You are the problem. If you stop supplying them, if you stop training them, these people will die. So that is why they chose to make two parties. One party on the other side is Rwanda. The other side of the party is DRC. How true it is and how effective it will, time will tell. My worry, though, is if the American intervention comes, I don't know whether it comes by placement of units, boots on the ground, whether the intervention will come with putting boots on the ground. But even if it comes with boots on the ground, there have been embarrassing situations they have gone through. In Somalia, America put boots on the ground, and the troops were killed and dragged on the street of Mogadishu. The dead American pulled on the street. So in this jungle, if somebody wanted a guerrilla warfare, it could be a very big embarrassment to a superpower. If they brought boots on the ground to protect the minerals, it would be a bad embarrassment to a superpower. If in the desert of Somalia it could be, how about in the jungle? And our superpower people have only been known to do high-tech war and in a conventional warfare. But somebody who hits you in the jungle and disappears is difficult. So I'm yet to see the operationalization of this text that is drawn, whether it will demand boots on the ground to protect the interest. But it is so open and so wrong and rudely drafted that you call two countries to your capital and you dictate, I want you to do this, because just openly, without fear, without shame. So let's wait for the implementation. But if another power, it may not even be Congo, another power may come from somewhere and makes it a proxy war to make sure that grow up a guerrilla thing in the jungle there and make sure this thing is frustrated. What will they do? Because by putting boots on the ground, you will see whether these American soldiers will run into the jungle. Jungle where you don't have technology, where you are nearly fighting with a fist or somebody's hidden and hitting you. Whether you put helmet all over your body, it will be difficult. So the effect to us is that we are excluded. It presupposes that Uganda doesn't have any interest there, or just take care of the interest. Even it means therefore that if America sees ADF on the other hill, they say, what is that? ADF, they're fighting Uganda. It's okay. Do they affect our mineral? No. Continue. For us, it is mineral. As long as you ADF there, you don't care about our mineral. Go attack Uganda, burn schools, come back, but don't touch our mineral. We are okay. We are not bothered about you. I still insist the final position is that the operationalization of that text, especially where it mentions American strategic military, whatever. Training, you can do it, but even the training wing can be attacked, especially by rebels. So with the precedent of other having been humiliated in some guerrilla warfare, I'm yet to see the operationalization of this text. It can turn out embarrassing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think I'll give everyone a minute to just conclude and we wrap it up. 1 minute.
Yeah, I think our discussion today just gives us a conclusion that however much a leader is very good, it needs that he gives time and space for other leaders. And I have a feeling that every leader who comes makes a different contribution, however weak he or she is. Having 40 years, 50 years under one leader only creates patronage. And that's why you see in countries where leaders have been there for so long, the state is run by corruption and patronage, and in most cases, poor welfare. On the issue of Congo, I really think that we are yet to see a solution to Congo. Congo needs a homegrown solution, because the problem in Congo is not because of people going there. It is just a weak state that cannot run its own affairs.
George?
Text without context is pretext. So what we are seeing in this DRC Rwanda agreement is really so much of pretext, because it doesn't delve deep into the underlying drivers of that and also the multiple interests that play out in the conflict in the DRC. So understanding the situation and seeing how it manifests itself would be a greater way to delve deeper and coming out with a responsive agreement. So I still think that the jury is still out there on how this is going to work out for the DRC. For the case of Uganda, we only have one country. It's Uganda, and we must guard it, and guard it well. So we must all be, we must have each other's back. And this election that is coming should give us the opportunity again to test how much we are prepared, to go the extra mile to make sure that we make our country work and work for everyone.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, maybe starting with the DRC, Washington deal, so that I concentrate on Uganda. I think it will either be a turning point or a pointless turn. And most likely it might end up being a pointless turn when it comes to lasting peace in DRC and the region in general. On Uganda, President Museveni celebrated 80 years this year, officially. It could be more, because some people say when he was at Dar he was younger than the Minister of Finance. But now Minister of Finance is older, so I don't know. So at his age, he has to be managed. And who is managing him? You can see the son in charge of the army and how messy UPDF has become with the JAT, which used to be a sophisticated arm of security, behaving like terrorists on the street, with the President Museveni being escorted by a host of goons that raid havoc in the city to pick nomination forms. I think people will have to close their shops and run on the day he returns those shops, because now he moves with chaotic goons, to cheer him up, and they are hired goons for hire. And generally the deteriorating abuse of human rights under this tenure that is yet to finish. So the elections are likely to be more violent because he's not in charge, he's just merely being managed, and that tenure will be problematic.
Thank you.
Very unfortunate.
Joseph?
My first experiment was how to light a Basen banner that was Senior 1 in Mwiri. And so Uganda and under NRA, NRM, led by Mr. Museveni, has been a massive experiment, an experiment that has predominantly produced nothing but corruption and patronage. It hasn't worked. What hasn't worked for 40 years, even if you gave these guys another 100 years, it won't happen. So young Ugandans just have to come to terms that you try and you know it doesn't work. You try something else. And I think we need to be able to try something else. And like Comrade Awich has said, that power really is in the hands of Ugandans, predominantly young Ugandans. Respectively, I know they're beaten up by Mr. Museveni and his team, and particularly his military. But I think a critical number of Ugandans, when they say no, it is possible for them to cause the change we want. On the African thing, Robert, I think you're a little bit unfair when you talk about African leadership. There's some African countries where experiments, some of these things have worked. I mean, when you consider Botswana, recently, things which are happening in Ghana, which are different states. There are a few countries in Africa where things are working. And so we have exceptions. So it's possible for this country that these things actually do happen. I really hope that we look at these things in context, we look at these things inwardly. Young Africans get much more interested, and perhaps we also look at what is happening in the rest of the world, not in a blackmailing way that, oh, that is America, 400 years, it cannot happen. There's certain things that we can look around and realize that we're also human beings, and if it's happening there, there's no reason why it doesn't happen here. And so, finally, the events in DR Congo is a wake-up call. I think in our times, particularly my time as a student, I would have had a say as a high school student on this thing. And as a student in Makerere University, I would have had a say in these things. And today, I know things have changed, things are happening, but they're happening in a bad way. What is happening? DR Congo has been taken back to certainly almost a decade before the death of Patrice Lumumba. It's a shame.
Thank you. Major.
My parting shots, but my dear Gwaranyanje introduced something new, which I need to clear. One, for the record, I have been
that's family issue.
Chairman Ntare School All Boys twice, so I have record of all the All Boys. Matia Kasaija, the Minister of Finance, was 2 years ahead of Ntare.
So how old was he?
He was older, even if you take by class alone. There's no way you could be 2 years ahead and younger than somebody. In 1964, Matia Kasaija was finishing S6. Museveni finished in 1966. So it would be a miracle that you are 2 years ahead in class and yet you are 2 years younger than
no, it happened at the time.
You need to revise the mustard seed. Just a minute. In the mustard seed, President Museveni is clear, stating that he started school older because his father did not know the value of education.
Even then, Matia was older. So for the record, Matia was 2 years ahead of Ntare. That was one. Two, the goons. It doesn't make logic that NRM hires goons to loot people's shop. And we gain what? We repair our name. It makes us great or what? Goons got their T-shirts wet and rooted. Back to my... We pay them so that they do what?
Those were really goons.
We pay.
They took over.
And I can tell you, they got T-shirts.
They took over NRM headquarters.
They got T-shirts and they wanted to...
We're going to have another debate, another talk show. Allow Major to conclude.
Why we don't conclude? But you are because somebody instead of conclude introduce new things. That is the introduction.
Okay.
From
Let's finalize. You conclude, please, Major.
In conclusion, there are two segments to our discussion. Segment one about the Ugandan case is that I want to conclude by saying power belongs to the people, and that article is entrenched and it was never amended. Therefore, people have a right to every 5 years change their leaders. On the question of Congo, I believe that is not yet resolved. A lot is yet to be seen, and we wish them well.
Thank you. Thank you very much to you all, Dr. Robert Ojiambo, Honorable George Odongo, Dr. Sarah Bireete, Mr. Joseph Ochieno, and you, retired Major Awich Pollar. Thank you. We've been discussing Museveni's quest for a 7th term and the U.S. brokered peace deal between the DRC and Rwanda. here on the Citizens Chat Show. I'm your host, Judith and team. Thank you very much. Do drop us a comment in the comment section. Be a part of this discussion. Let us know what you think about what we've been talking about. And we do read your comments. Also, subscribe if you haven't, and share this content as far as you can. Thank you very much. We'll be back next week.